The impact lit up the night side of Aven 3 like a second sun. Sensors on orbital platforms flared with warnings, and seismic graphs went haywire as the ground convulsed. The object, a transport-class vessel of Terran origin, had slammed into the mineral flats at nearly Mach 3, skipping once, then plowing into the bedrock like a thrown boulder. From orbit, Commander Tarsal of the Zytherian cartel watched the real-time telemetry with a detached fascination. The ship, according to scans, had suffered catastrophic failure in its primary inertial dampeners. There was no distress signal, no indication of escape pods, no energy remaining in its reactors. It was a crater with a tail of melted alloy. No life signs, Tarsal said, tilting his pale blue cranial crest in satisfaction. Impact of that magnitude would pulverize internal organs before the hull even breached. The cadet beside him, smaller and still green, adjusted his scanning array. Should we dispatch a salvage unit? Tarsal waved a clawed limb. Send a drone first. Let's confirm debris integrity. The drone descended in a whisper of ionized air. Its cameras panned across the wreckage half-buried, scorched black, and oozing steam from ruptured conduits. Most of the fuselage was crumpled inward like paper around a fist. The cockpit had sheared off entirely, its pieces scattered like confetti several hundred meters away. As the drone circled, its sensors caught movement. At first, Tarsal thought it a glitch, but then a shape pulled itself free from the crumpled midsection of the wreck. Humanoid. One arm hung at an unnatural angle. Blood red and thick streaked the figure's side. It half fell onto the scorched dirt, coughed, then pushed itself upright, wobbling. Tarsal leaned forward. Impossible. The cadet's voice cracked. That's a human. Sir, it's alive. Through the drone's mic, a faint voice came through, hoarse and slurred. I need water. The human collapsed again. Tarsal blinked once, twice. Dispatch a medical unit immediately. Do not let it die. The Zytherian triage chamber was dimly lit and smelled of antiseptics and ion-sanitized air. The human, later identified by his suit's biometric tag as Jackson Lorne, was stabilized within an hour. Internal bleeding had been extensive. His left femur was fractured, 2 ribs broken, and his right shoulder dislocated. A mild concussion clouded his awareness, but his vitals held steady. When Jackson first opened his eyes, he blinked against the warm blue lighting. His mouth was dry, throat raw. A Zytherian medic stepped into view. You are aboard the Zytherian research vessel Cavern. You suffered a severe crash. Do you comprehend? Jackson rasped. Water. The medic nodded and inserted a hydration tube between his lips. Cool liquid filled his mouth. He swallowed greedily. How long was I out? 3 standard hours. Jackson tried to sit up but groaned and fell back. Pain stabbed through his leg and side. Do not move. You have multiple injuries. We are repairing what we can. Your skeletal structure is crude but resilient. Jackson gave a weak chuckle that turned into a cough. Thanks for the compliment. Tarsal arrived shortly after. His tall, lean form entered without ceremony. You should be dead, Tarsal said. Jackson turned his head slightly. Been hearing that a lot today. The forces involved in your descent were beyond survivable thresholds. Your vessel had no functioning dampeners. By Zytherian standards, this is biologically implausible. Jackson licked his lips. Guess I didn't get the memo. Tarsal studied him like one might a curious anomaly in a petri dish. Why did your ship crash? Jackson closed his eyes for a moment, trying to recall. Ion storm hit us outside the belt. Fried half the systems. Woke up mid-spin. Tried to stabilize. Failed. Were you alone? Jackson hesitated, then nodded. Crew had evacuated earlier. I stayed behind to reroute power. Didn't work. Tarsal turned to the medic. Monitor him. I want scans every 6 hours. Over the next several days, Jackson's recovery was slow and painful. Zytherian medical tech could close wounds and prevent infection, but they lacked deep knowledge of human physiology. For bone fractures, they used scaffolding supports, and for muscular tears, regenerative stimulants that left Jackson nauseated for hours. A Zytherian biologist named Velen took interest in him. Velen was more curious than clinical, often asking questions mid-treatment. How did your body withstand the G-forces? Jackson gritted his teeth as a support brace tightened around his leg. Wish I knew. Blacked out. Woke up inside a pile of burning metal. You were not wearing an exosuit. No time. Velen blinked slowly. Humans are. Inefficient. Yet you persist. Jackson gave a weak chuckle. We're stubborn like that. Velen tilted its head. Stubbornness is not an evolutionary advantage. Maybe not. But it keeps us alive. By the end of the second week, Jackson could sit up and speak without pain. Walking, however, was still out of reach. His leg throbbed constantly and the fracture showed only minimal alignment on scans. He was moved to a larger chamber, one with a viewport. Outside, the purple deserts of Aven 3 stretched endlessly. Tarsal visited again. You are a point of contention, Tarsal said. Several Zytherian factions believe your survival invalidates our biological models. Jackson leaned back against the padded surface. Happy to mess with your science. We have recreated the impact in simulation. Over 80% of the models predict total liquefaction. Your survival is statistically absurd. Yet here I am. Tarsal narrowed his eyes. What are you made of? Jackson smiled weakly. Coffee and bad decisions. 3 weeks post-impact, Jackson took his first steps. His leg was weak, the muscles atrophied, and the pain sharp with every movement. Velen walked beside him, not offering support, just watching. You should not strain the fracture, Velen said. Got to start sometime. You humans heal slowly. Tell me about it. He made it 3 meters before collapsing onto a bench, sweat dripping from his face. Velen handed him a cloth. Your persistence is unsettling. Jackson wiped his brow. You keep saying that like it's a bad thing. It disrupts our metrics. Maybe your metrics need adjusting. By day 32, Jackson could walk unsupported for short periods. His ribs ached during deep breaths, and the shoulder remained tender, but he regained most of his mobility. That's when the Zytherian Council summoned him. The chamber was vast and echoing, filled with representatives. Tarsal stood near the center, motioning for Jackson to approach. You are here to answer a question, Tarsal said. How did you survive? Jackson looked around the room. I did what I had to. Braced for impact. Stayed conscious as long as I could. Luck played a part. A low murmur spread through the chamber. One of the elders spoke. Luck is not a viable explanation. Jackson shrugged. It is for us. Tarsal stepped forward. Your body should have ruptured. Your vessel was torn apart. You crawled out. You even stood. How? Jackson met his gaze. Because dying wasn't the plan. Intent does not override biology. No, but it gives you a reason to fight. Tarsal fell silent. That night, Jackson sat beneath the viewport, staring at Aven 3's twin moons. Velen approached. You confuse us. Not the first time I've done that. You should have died. Jackson exhaled slowly. I know. Yet you didn't. He nodded. Velen sat beside him. Perhaps resilience is not so primitive after all. Jackson smiled faintly. We adapt. That's what we do. Velen tilted its head. You should rest. I will. As Velen left, Jackson leaned back, leg aching, ribs tight but alive. He had survived an impact no one believed survivable. Not because he was stronger. Not because he was lucky. Because, when the world shattered around him, he refused to let go. Whatever came next, he was ready. On the 41st day after impact, Jackson Lorne stood inside a Zytherian pressure chamber surrounded by transparent walls and humming diagnostic pillars. A gray harness snaked around his chest and a cold biosensor patch clung to his temple. 4 Zytherian technicians monitored his vitals while a 5th adjusted the gravity dial in 0.5% increments. Let's try 1.3 Earth gravity, said Velen, who now wore a control sash indicating temporary authority over the chamber. Jackson nodded, jaw clenched. He'd been walking without support for over a week, but only under Zytherian standard pressure, which was about 70% of Earth's. His muscles had rebuilt slowly, helped along by unfamiliar protein infusions and a diet he still didn't trust. The shift in pressure hit like a sack of bricks. His knees buckled and he caught the rail beside him, breath shallow. You may stop. This is not required, Velen said. Jackson straightened slowly. It kind of is. The next step he took was deliberate, the one after that close to a stumble. He grunted, rebalanced, and took another. One of the technicians turned to Velen. He's exceeding projected thresholds. The strain on his cardiovascular system is inefficient. He knows that, Velen said. Jackson kept moving. If you're all done talking about me like I'm not here, I've got another lab. They let him. He finished it with a sweat-soaked undershirt and a pulse of 140. Afterward, they helped him into a rehydration chamber where microjets cooled his skin and filtered out lactic acid buildup. "I'm going to need shoes eventually," he said, eyes closed, head tilted back. "Your physiology requires an excessive number of accessories," Velen replied. "Feet don't like alien floors." Later that cycle, they brought him to a cavernous chamber with a projection dome spanning over 100 meters wide. Inside, hundreds of species crash scenarios were simulated frame by frame. Jackson recognized none of them. Some were gelatinous, others crystalline, a few aquatic. All were dead within seconds of impact. "Your survival has generated diplomatic traffic," Tarsal said, appearing beside him. "Let me guess. They think I'm lying." "Some do. Others suspect you've been enhanced." Jackson crossed his arms, still sore from the last session. "They're not wrong. Titanium rods in my leg. Had that done 5 years ago after a mining collapse. Didn't know that counted as cheating. Your admission will be recorded." "Good." A new simulation began. His own crash reconstructed in brutal detail. The ship came in tail first, spinning. The nose struck the ground in a blur. The hull fragmented, internal components scattering. His section was shown compressing, slowing, then stopping. The projection showed his body slamming into a bulkhead, then lying still. "So why am I not paced?" Jackson asked. "We cannot determine that. Maybe it's the titanium. That does not explain your neural recovery rate." Jackson turned to him. "You want a reason, and I don't have one. Maybe I should have died. But I didn't." "That should be enough." "It is not." The projection reset. This time, sensors highlighted stress points on his skeletal structure. "You're running out of ways to tell me I shouldn't be here. We are not trying to convince you. We are trying to understand you. You could try asking more and scanning less." Tarsal turned to Velen. "Start a new cognitive resilience trial." Velen hesitated. "He hasn't cleared for neuroexertion." "Schedule it anyway." 3 days later, Jackson sat in a padded chair with neural nodes tapping into his scalp. 4 displays hovered in front of him, each showing a different visual challenge: pattern recognition, temporal sequencing, spatial logic, and emotional inference using alien expressions. "You're testing how fast I can think under stress," Jackson said. "No," Velen replied. "We are testing how long you resist cognitive degradation under prolonged overload." The test ran for over 90 minutes. By the end, he was sweating through his tunic and blinking hard to stay focused. Red warnings flashed in the corner of one screen. He ignored them and kept going. "How many alien emotions am I supposed to recognize?" he asked. 70, Velen said. "I've got 5. Mostly guesses. Your guesses are statistically significant." "Lucky me." The displays shut off. "You exceeded our upper limit," Velen said. "That mean I win something?" "You will be subjected to a longer trial next time." "Of course." In the following week, Zytherian political delegates began requesting audience with him. Not interviews, audiences. He was led into a chamber that smelled like copper and ozone. A group of 6 stood in a half-circle, each wearing different crested sashes. One had a glowing orb hovering behind its shoulder, the function of which Jackson never understood. "You are the Terran who endured the impact," said the one in front. "I'm Jackson. We request a demonstration." "I'm not a magician. Your body sustained forces that should have liquefied your organs. We wish to observe your methods of resilience." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "What, you want me to crash another ship?" The group exchanged glances. "I was attempting humor," Jackson said. Tarsal stood nearby, arms folded. "They are unfamiliar with Earth sarcasm." "I noticed." One of the delegates stepped forward, holding a small device. "We have synthesized a strain of atmospheric toxins. They are lethal to most known respiratory systems. Yours appears resistant. We ask you to inhale a controlled dose." "You want me to breathe poison?" "For observation." Jackson looked to Tarsal. "This is diplomacy where you're from?" "No. This is curiosity." He turned back to the delegate. "I'll do it if one of you does it first." The Zytherians conferred again, then declined. Later, as he rested in his quarters with a cooling wrap around his knee, Velen arrived carrying a translucent tablet. "You have been offered a contract." "I'm not signing anything without reading it." Velen handed it over. "They want to study you further. In exchange, they offer access to Zytherian archives and off-world movement. Jackson scanned the glyphs. This says I be classified as a non-citizen biological reference subject. That is correct. So I be a lab rat. Not exclusively. Jackson dropped the tablet on the table. Hard pass. Velen didn't argue. It is wise to retain autonomy. An hour later, the lights flickered. A ripple of red passed across the ceiling, followed by a low tremor. Was that an earthquake? Jackson asked. No. That was a kinetic impact. External. They exited into the corridor as alarms began to pulse. Zytherian personnel moved quickly, some in armor, others wielding scanning devices shaped like tuning forks. Who's knocking? Jackson asked. Tarsal appeared from the lift. Unregistered vessel. No known transponder. It landed near your wreck. Interesting timing. Indeed. Minutes later, he was aboard a shuttle descending toward the crash site. Tarsal sat across from him, silent. The wreck of Jackson's ship still lay half-buried, but beside it a new structure had appeared, sleek, triangular, and humming with energy. Someone salvaging. Or searching. They landed beside the site. 2 Zytherian guards flanked him as they approached. A hatch on the intruding vessel hissed open. Out stepped a human. Female, mid-30s, patched flight suit, eyes sharp. She squinted at him. Well, I'll be damned, she said. They said no one could have lived through that. Good to see someone from Earth, Jackson replied. She walked closer. Name's Delaney. I came for the black box. Didn't expect company. You found it? Not yet. Thought I'd be alone. Tarsal stepped forward. Identify your vessel. Independent salvage. No registry. No weapons. You were trespassing on Zytherian jurisdiction. Didn't realize this rock was claimed. Jackson looked between them. She's not here for trouble. Let her look. Your opinion does not alter protocol, Tarsal said. Delaney raised her hands. I'll be quick. Tarsal hesitated, then gave a short nod. 10 minutes. Delaney walked toward the wreck, Jackson limping after her. How'd you make it? She asked. I didn't stop trying. She glanced sideways. They're scared of you, you know? Let them be. She smiled. Might be the first time humans get invited to a council because we survived something stupid. I wouldn't have it any other way. At dawn, the wind over Aven 3's mineral flats carried a dry, bitter tang that clung to the back of the throat. Jackson stood at the edge of the crater, arms crossed, watching Delaney's boots crunch over fractured alloy. Her scanner buzzed faintly as she swept it across the scorched remains of his ship's midsection. Black box is wedged under the secondary coolant brace, she muttered, crouching. No wonder the Zytherians didn't find it. Their drones don't scan past ferromagnetic shielding. Jackson shifted his weight, legs still aching in bursts. You sure it's intact? If it isn't, I just wasted fuel I couldn't afford. Inside the crater, her gloved hands pried up scorched paneling. A puff of vapor rose as she breached the insulation. She reached in, yanked hard, and fell back with a grunt, dragging the recorder free. It was a dull sphere, scorched but unbroken. Got it, she said, brushing ash from her sleeve. Now we find out who was lying. Tarsal, standing behind them with 4 armed Zytherians, stepped forward. That object is subject to jurisdictional review. Delaney didn't look up. It's a Terran flight data core. You can review it after we've verified it hasn't been tampered with. You have no authority to remove. Jackson raised a hand. Let her bring it to my quarters. I'll authorize a joint analysis. Tarsal's pupils narrowed. There's no legal precedent. There's also no precedent for surviving that crash, but we're all just improvising now. Tarsal's crest twitched, then he stepped back. By midday, the recorder sat on a slab table in Jackson's room, surrounded by a translation interface and a Zytherian data uplink. Delaney knelt beside it with a micro tool, fingers steady. Sweat darkened her collar. Still can't believe they didn't just rip this out with a tractor beam, she said. They assumed everything inside was paste. Yeah, well, they're not the only ones. The recorder clicked as she accessed its encryption lock. A moment later, a projection flickered to life above it. Flight telemetry, system logs, power routes, all data leading up to the impact. Jackson leaned in. There, see that dip in the inertial matrix? That's when the secondary dampeners failed. Right before the spin started. Delaney zoomed in. Main thrusters were trying to compensate, but the override loop kept resetting. You were basically balancing a falling satellite on one thruster and prayer. Felt like it too. She scrubbed forward. The final moments replayed in brutal clarity. The hull temperature surged, the cabin pressure dropped, and then impact. The internal cameras went black. A single heartbeat later, a biometric ping, faint, erratic, but unmistakably human. Delaney sat back on her heels. You really didn't die. Nope. She looked at him, eyes narrowing. No stims? No dermal armor? No cryo contingency. Nothing but some old titanium rods and a strong dislike of dying. She stood and turned to Tarsal, who had been watching silently. There it is. Proof. He wasn't enhanced, wasn't shielded. Just stubbornly alive. Tarsal didn't blink. Your species violates our assumptions in increasingly inconvenient ways. You're welcome. By evening, word had spread. Zytherian delegates filed into the central compound, murmuring in their tonal dialects. A council had been called not to decide Jackson's fate, but to reassess the biological models of humanoid survivability. Inside the council chamber, Jackson stood beside Delaney and Velen while the delegates reviewed the footage. The room's ambient lighting pulsed in rhythm with the data stream. No one interrupted. When the final biometric blip faded from the projection, the silence lingered. Finally, one of the older delegates stepped forward. Its skin bore the faded lines of age, and its translation crest flickered. You do not possess regenerative capabilities beyond standard mammalian range, it said. You do not possess neurological backup systems. Your bone density is suboptimal. Thanks, Jackson replied. Yet you survived. Yes. The delegate paused. We must revise our models. Tarsal stepped beside him. We acknowledge the anomaly, but we remain uncertain whether it is individual or systemic. Delaney crossed her arms. You think this is a fluke? Statistical outliers must be tested. Jackson raised an eyebrow. You want me to crash another ship? No, but we request a full physiological profile for comparative study. Velen interjected. He's already given more than necessary. His data is sufficient. Tarsal turned to Jackson. You may choose to leave, or remain as a research consultant. Delaney glanced at him. You thinking about staying? He looked out through the chamber's high window. The Aven horizon dipped in violet waves beneath a twin sun dusk. I've done enough crashing for a while. Maybe time to land somewhere. She nodded once. I've got cargo runs out of Cygnus Gate. I could use a co-pilot who doesn't die easily. I'll think about it. Later that night, Jackson walked alone through the biodome gardens, his limp barely noticeable. Rows of alien flora shimmered under artificial moonlight, their leaves iridescent with motion-activated pigmentation. A low chittering from a two-legged herbivore echoed in the distance. Velen found him near the hydroponic stream. You are leaving. Probably. You altered our understanding. That does not happen often. I'm still not sure what I actually proved. That survival is not always a function of design. He nodded slowly. Sometimes it's just not letting go. Velen tilted its head. You are not the strongest, nor the fastest, but you are the most unreasonable. Jackson laughed. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me here. You will not be forgotten. I hope not. At dawn, Delaney's ship lifted off in a bloom of turquoise thrusters. Jackson stood beside her in the cockpit, strapping in. Where to first? He asked. Wherever someone says it's impossible to get through. He settled into the co-pilot seat, the ache in his leg dull but familiar. Sounds about right. Behind them, the Zytherian outpost grew smaller, a dot vanishing into orange haze. Jackson didn't look back. He didn't need to. He had walked out of a fireball, stood in front of an alien council, and rewrote the definition of survivable. Not because he was exceptional, but because humans had an odd habit of doing things no one believed they could. And now he was flying again. That was enough.